on the road. Says is now streaming on live on Facebook. It's delayed. Man, Steve, that's a lot of sunlight, buddy. There we go.
I couldn't get my audio to work on my computer, so I'm on my iPad.
There you go. Yeah, you sound good there.
Okay.
Hey, Dan, have you heard anything about flags today? I like your background.
Maybe a little.
A little. Linda, we good? All right. Board of Alderman work session is called to order. We only have one agenda item today. Oh, thank you for letting me know. All right, Zoom. Discussion of the American Recovery Act funds and our CARES funds that we still have. Cynthia, is this handed off to you?
Yes.
Go for it.
Yep. So information was provided in your packet, and I'll go through this a little bit for those of you new to the governing body, but we've also had discussion earlier today. Last year, so I want to talk about two items, and we'll need direction on both. One being the distribution and utilization of the remaining CARES funds, and then the second, direction from the governing body with regards to the American Recovery Plan Act. So with regard to CARES, last year, the city received just over $945,000 of CARES monies from Clay County. The memo in the packet outlines those expenses that were directly related to COVID that we utilized a significant amount of those funds on, whether for city programs, for establishing grant or reimbursement programs to other entities. As I noted, those are outlined here. In addition, at the end of last year, right before the turnback deadline for providing the information back to Clay County, there was another issuance from the U.S. Treasury Department that outlined the ability to be able to utilize or refund monies to cities for the expenditures related to public safety through the course of the pandemic. So there's about $280,000 in CARES funds that we earmarked as taking from Clay County for those expenditures for the first part of shutdown for police department expenses. We have created, at the time that we received the $945,000 in CARES money, a separate fund to account for receipt of those funds and kept those segregated from the general fund. Whenever we made expenditures to other entities, those were paid from the CARES fund. If we reimbursed ourselves for, and you all have taken action on any of the reimbursements that we've done to pay for items like the purchase of the touchless faucets, those direct expenses that we incurred. As this memo outlines, there's about $251,000 of that police department the police salary allocation that remains in the CARES fund. At this time, staff would request that the board provide direction, and we bring forward in a future regular session the movement of, or the direction to move the remaining monies from that CARES fund, that $251,000, to the general fund. That would then allow us to be able to reimburse for those police department expenditures, and it would provide funding to the general fund that's not stipulated for any specific CARES use. That would increase the general fund balance by that $251,000. Then, as a separate action, if the board concurs with that direction, we have information provided for how we would recommend utilization of some windfall of funds in the general fund, about $225,000. I don't know if you all want me to continue working through kind of those allocations, and then we have a general discussion, or if you want to provide direction or feedback or comment with regard to that transfer of CARES funds to the general fund.
Any comments?
I say keep going.
Okay.
And then we discuss it.
Perfect. Okay.
Anybody? Everybody's good? Marv? Okay.
Okay.
Let's go.
So if we do have additional funds within the general fund, staff has looked at needs this year and in the coming year and would make 3 primary recommendations that are really related to goals that we've been trying to pursue and are in line with conversations that we had last Thursday at the retreat. And all of these are items we would just seek general direction from the governing body this evening, and we would bring actions forward to make budget amendments and work through processes as outlined here in the coming weeks and months. The first item that staff would recommend is that $75,000 be allocated to complete phases 2 and 3 of the electrical upgrades at Smithsport Campground. As the board will recall, earlier this year with 2021 funds, we completed the first phase of upgrades to the electrical at the campground. We anticipated this to be a 3-phase project. As we look at that, we really would like to speed that up a little bit and complete the project in one final phase at the end of camping season this year. And that by being able to combine those into one phase, we think we could realize some savings. And by pulling or bringing forward that replacement, those upgrades, we would have online additional camping spots with the higher electrical power or amps to be able to rent those out. So we would see increased expenditures. So that's recommendation number 1. The second recommendation is to allocate $75,000 to initiate a police facility needs assessment study, which would include schematic design. We'd like to do that this year to help us understand what needs would be there and what costs might be associated if we were to look at building a new police station. We are hopeful that $75,000 would be on the high end of our estimate for that work, but this would help us understand those needs and general ideas for design for a new police station.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Sure.
Would that include like locations of where this will go, things like that, or is this just a police station in general?
We could look at locations. One of the items that we've had as ongoing discussion is we do own some land close to downtown there at Second Creek and 169 that I think staff has anticipated would be an appropriate place for that, but that's definitely discussion we need to have with the board.
Okay.
But I think the primary goal is to get renderings and sizing and stuff for if we go out for a ballot issue and bond, correct?
And it really gives us cost estimates for looking at what our needs are based on staffing and growth and what the department might look like in the coming years to help us understand what a facility needs to look like, what it would cost, and what we would need to be able to raise in funds and what debt issuance might be necessary in order to make that happen.
Yeah, similar to what we did with the infrastructure, sales tax, and bond with Streetscape.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, and then the final area would be allocation of $75,000 to Main Street. This is just general information included. We'd need to have some additional discussion, but like we talked at the retreat last week, we'd like to see some additional progress in meeting the goals of the Main Street program. One thing that staff and mayor have had some conversation about is perhaps the potential of a part-time position that could be perhaps front-loaded through city funds, and we could establish an agreement with the Main Street program and fund that position in reducing proportion over the years. This could also provide some funding just for general progress or processes for Main Street. As I noted earlier, this recommendation would be to allocate those funds, or at least to start the study of how we would need to allocate that in additional work to the in discussions over the coming months. So that's staff's recommendation and request at this point in time. First would be some direction from the governing body with regard to the $251,000 that remains in the CARES fund. Should it remain in the CARES fund to be used on COVID-related items, or should it be transferred to the general fund to cover those police items that we can use for anything? And then if we do move that, does this allocation make sense?
Makes sense to me. Anybody against that?
I agree. Nope.
Yeah.
I agree with all of it.
I
Move
agree
it.
as well.
Use it.
I
I
think
agree. The only thing that I would caution against is you know, what is things looking like as far as a forecast for COVID later on this year? I mean, are we just kind of counting on maybe if there is another massive outbreak or anything, you know, will we, you know, have to deal with that? That's the only thing I can think of, but otherwise I like what's being presented here.
yeah, and we're keeping back a little bit for that too, right, Cynthia? We have 25,000.
Right, this allocation utilizes, it leaves $25,000 in the general fund that could be used to respond to something COVID related as well.
But when it comes to facility upgrades and equipment, all that stuff, we bought foggers, we bought all that stuff. We've got PPE still around. Right, it'd mostly be if we wanted to look at doing anything with, yeah, time off or that. But that's about it, John. I think we've got just about everything else covered. But we don't know what the future holds, right? So
right, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good with it. And like we've talked about, and I'll make sure this is heard here to the board and anyone listening in. With the Main Street group, we need to just make sure it's a solid MOU with the clear goals that they have to hit, you know, certain numbers and provide us a budget and different things to make sure that they're meeting their grant requirements, along with funding that executive director position that's part of the Main Street program. We can't just depend on volunteers all the time. We need to make sure we have a staff position to keep that moving in the right direction, and we can't just put that always on volunteers. And we can't put it on Anna or Cynthia or anybody else either on our current staff because they're already loaded up with work. So. Okay, anything else?
So then we will, in obviously not tonight's meeting, but probably at the next meeting in June, we'll have that budget amendment to move those funds from the CARES fund to the general fund, and probably go ahead and address those expenditures in those funds as well.
Yeah, and then so that's on the CARES. Did you want to talk about the next one now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
One before we do that, yeah, go ahead.
You want me to go ahead with the American Recovery Act?
Yeah. Does anybody else have
American
anything for CARES?
I'm sorry?
Does anybody else have any questions on CARES funding? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So then with regard to the American Rescue Plan Act, this is the plan that was adopted March 22nd by Congress. We anticipate from prior communications, and we're still trying to confirm exact numbers, but we anticipate just shy of $2 million allocated to the city of Smithville. It's anticipated, the act initially indicated that the first round funding would be allocated out to states and then roll out from there within, I believe it was 90 days of passage of the law. So we're looking at a time frame, we would anticipate to see those funds this summer. I'm not sure exactly when, and even as recently as today, there was a question on the city manager's listserv for the state saying, has anybody heard anything new about when we might be able to anticipate those funds? So we're keeping an eye out for when that will happen. But like I said, we do anticipate, I would say by the end of the summer, we should have those funds. All of the funds must be obligated, not spent, but obligated by December 31st of 2024, and then spent by December 31st of 2026. 2 weeks ago, the Department of Treasury issued a circular that outlined, that interpreted the 4 areas that the act outlined for general areas of expenditure. And those are outlined on page 3 of the memo provided in the packet. There are 4 areas. The first 3 really through the Department of Treasury circular and legal interpretation that we have had both from our legal staff as well as information from MMA, MCMA, MML, and other sources. Those first 3 areas, responding to the health emergency or its negative economic impacts, providing premium pay to eligible workers, and providing government services, really have restrictions or ties related to revenue loss. We didn't really experience revenue loss through the pandemic. We might have had minor losses in municipal court or some rentals, but not to the degree that a lot of communities have experienced. In review of the information, staff and legal staff really feel like the category with the fewest restrictions and broadest allowable use for the city is that final category to assist in meeting critical needs and investments and improvements to existing infrastructure. Existing infrastructure is specifically defined as water, sewer, and broadband. One of the things that is really clear is that transportation is not included as an infrastructure item, but the act is clear in everything with CARES. If you had budgeted any funds prior to the pandemic for certain areas, you couldn't replace those budgeted funds or start on a project that was already underway utilizing CARES funds. That is not the case with the American Recovery Plan Act money. They may be used for projects that are already included in a municipality's budget. So based on review of the information and conversation with legal staff this evening is recommending that the entirety of our funding, that close to $2 million, be allocated to water and sewer infrastructure projects that are already in the works. Right now, actually, the bid packet is out and bids will be opened next Tuesday for our raw water pump station project, which is the project near Smithsport Campground. That includes not only the pump station, but also the copper ion project to address the zebra mussel issue and the campground lift station. Total, that one project with 3 smaller items within it is estimated at about $2.3 million. As I noted earlier, those bids will receive next week. So we'll know where we stand with that. But staff recommends that the entirety of the American Recovery Plan Act funds be utilized for that project. In our budget, we had accounted for that $2.3 million utilizing impact fees and then also water and sewer revenues. This would alleviate some of the strain on that water and wastewater fund, the combined water and wastewater systems fund, and allow us to save some of the impact fees for projects for growth in the system down the road. So what we're looking for this evening from the board is concurrence with that recommendation, or if there are other questions or concerns that you have. And Chuck is here and can answer questions about that sewer project. For the last several months, kind of since the act has been approved, we've had ongoing discussions about how we might be able to fund things, and infrastructure has been the highlight of what we've looked at and really have honed in on water and sewer because of those significant needs we have in the system. So as I said, this evening, we're looking for direction from the board if there is concurrence with this recommendation. And if that's the case, when we come forward with the recommendation for this project, we'll include this funding, and hopefully we'll have some additional information as to timing for that as well.
Yeah, well, so I've seen how slow these projects can move. So if we have to have it spent by that, it's great that we can pay for something that's already out to bid and ready to go. Because really 3 years is not a lot of time to get that money spent. So.
And the nice thing though, it also is, we don't have that money in hand and we're not entirely certain when we'll have it, but we don't have any bills. We won't be making payments on that project for quite some time either. We've got to get it mobilized and the like. So timing should be perfect here.
Yep.
Let's move forward.
Yeah.
Kill them zebra mussels. Wash out your boat, people.
I don't have a
They
vote
move
anymore.
forward.
Good job, Dan. No more boat to worry about. Rinse out your boat. It costs us a lot of money. What's that project? What's the copper ion stuff costing us, Chuck? More than $10?
Mm-hmm.
What's car wash?
More than $10. I don't remember the breakdown. It's significant.
Yeah, and we already had to replace the pump too, didn't we? Didn't we have to do emergency purchase last year or the year before?
It wasn't last year. It was
Years
either,
ago.
I think it may have been 18.
18?
I think it was my first summer here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wash out your boats, people. I'm all for it. Anybody have any questions?
I heard Kelly and Marv both say go for it.
I'm okay with it.
Sarver,
Go
thank you.
for it.
Euladol?
Um,
He says spend it all on these flags behind his head. Chevalier?
I think the money is used to get people back to work, so let's get people to work.
And our system's getting a little more strained with people working from home, right, Chuck? Seen a little more usage?
A little bit more.
And a lot of rain lately, right?
Yeah, too much.
How much slip lining are we starting tomorrow with that project?
They'll start on Main Street. It's probably, well, they gave us a whole schedule.
Hundreds of feet?
Oh yeah, it goes in pretty quick.
Sweet.
So they'll probably have Main Street done tomorrow.
Well, hopefully it doesn't. If we get rain, it'll keep some of it out, right?
Should do a good job.
Cool.
You
Cynthia,
should see. We'll have before and after pictures. We were looking at the before pictures. Those pipes are pretty rough.
it smells when you do it too, right?
A little bit.
Kelly, if you smell something really weird at the school, just know it's Chuck melting your pipes with new slip lines.
It smells better than the alternative.
Let your neighbors know if they smell burning plastic or whatever it smells like, fiberglass, whatever that stuff is.
Fiberglass impregnated sock.
Yeah, with resin on it, right? And then you just hit it with a lot of heat.
Yep. Hot water.
Smells great. All right, Cynthia, you need anything else on this one?
I don't believe so. Thank you
All
all.
right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for the 10 minutes before the next meeting.
And we're on the same Zoom, right, Linda?
Or we just hang out for 10 minutes. Alderman Atkins, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Uh,
Aye.
All opposed, say no. See y'all in a couple minutes. Grab a bio break if you need it.